We are live. What's good, guys? How's it going?
Doing well.
Yeah, doing good. Thanks for having us here.
Excited to be here.
Of course, man. So why don't you guys start off with some introduction to introduce yourself to the guest and some background.
Yeah, I can go first, and then Will, you can come in after.
Sure.
So my name is Shiv. Shiv-a-knocker. I like to say it's Shiv like Christmas Eve, if you have a tough time with it. Yeah, what's my journey? What's my path? So I ended up in the financial planning industry through a weird circumstance of events. I initially left college and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I thought I wanted to go into ministry, and I was really excited about a church that I was a part of. And one thing that they say when you go into ministry is you don't do it for the money. And I was broke, and I had a girlfriend at the time that I wanted to marry, and I knew my parents weren't going to be supportive of this wedding, so I needed to fund this. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I just need to go make some money, and started thinking, what is the quickest way I can make as much money as humanly possible? Let's do the mortgage industry. Okay. And so I entered head deep into that, but really fell in love with the financial services space and really fell in love with just helping people with pretty complicated financial topics. Buying a house and mortgages are overly complicated, and unless you have somebody that you can trust, it could be really hard. And so I fell in love with helping people and thought to myself for a while, I'm like, God, I think this is the industry. I think this is where I want to be. Luckily, COVID knocked some sense into me. So COVID was a good thing for me and my family. I just married her at the time, so just married my wife at the time. Now we're all locked into our house. We can't leave, so fast-tracked our marriage. I was like, this is awesome. I can spend all the time with you. But it also made me realize, I enjoyed helping people, but I realized that the mortgage world became very repetitive after a while. And it became like a sales robot where you're having the same conversations over and over again. And I lost the fire of, am I really helping people, or am I just coming in and getting commission check and then leaving? At the same time, our church closed down. So I was like, okay, ministry's closed too. So what's next for me? And that's when I started to really start exploring who I am and the skills that I have, and realize, man, I can help people on a bigger scale with financial planning and in a different way, in a long-term relationship. And never looked back ever since. Interesting, man. So that's a very interesting journey. It seems like it was a lot of twists and turns, but it led you to where you were trying to be. Yeah, exactly. I think I'm a firm believer that life kind of unveils itself to you. Even though we like to believe we have it super planned out, I think the reality is life deals you a set of cards, and you make the best decision you can with what you got. Yeah. And that's typically how, like you said, how it works out. It really, through all the trials and tribulations, it leads you down a path of where you're supposed to be anyways. Totally. Okay, no, that's dope, man. And then how about yourself?
My journey's a little longer because I'm quite a bit older than Shiv, so it's a few different twists and turns. But in the same manner as Shiv, I didn't start out in financial services. I was not sure what to do after college. I was a finance major, but wound my way through several different kind of startup jobs into an accounting firm where we did a bunch of litigation support, and that got into a lot of Excel spreadsheet analytical stuff. And I liked that, and I was good at it, but I really wanted to be with people. And just sitting at my desk cranking out spreadsheets wasn't much fun. So I had an opportunity to go work at a hedge fund, a little place in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, which is a neighboring community for Detroit, and got an inside track on institutional finance, which is when you were working with public pension funds, retirement funds, those types of things, large family offices. And I worked there for several years with some really great folks. And without looking, I had an opportunity to become a chief operating officer of a larger independent registered investment advisory firm in Southfield. And this was something that I wasn't really planning on doing, but it fell into my lap. They were managing money for large individual families, very wealthy individuals, and pension plans as well. So it was moving me in the direction of having more time with people who had technical tax problems and investment problems. And from there, I had a kind of a moment where I was looking for what's next, but I didn't know what that would be because I was getting bored in the operations space. The back office was easy to do, but it was not very engaging, and I wasn't getting that client interaction like I wanted. And I went to this networking event, and it's an interesting story. The networking event was unusual. They had a storyteller who was sharing about their entrepreneurial journey. And while this gentleman was sharing about how he had just started this company, he said this quote. He said, "Success without fulfillment is failure." And that just hit me right in the heart because I just resonated, right? Yeah. I was like, this is defining basically my entire career up to this point. Lots of success, zero fulfillment. And that I could qualify that as failure, and it felt like that. And so at the end of this networking event, we're sitting with a group of 3 or 4 people, broken into some small groups, having some awkward conversations with people that you don't know, that you just met. And the last question that the group leader was having, he said, on a scale of 1 to 10, just tell me how fulfilled you are in your current position professionally. And we're going around the table kind of like this, and you might be like 8, 7, you'd be a 10 for sure. You're an 11, Mark. And I'm thinking to myself, just say 6 or 7. And when it got to me, I said 3. And it was just total silence at the table. And long story short, the gentleman who was leading the table, he had started a business that did financial planning and investment management for high net worth individuals, but also the mass affluent. So people who maybe aren't multi-millionaires, but they have some problems that need to be solved. And he said, what's going on with your career? What do you want to do? And I said, I want to work with you. I want to learn how to be an advisor. I want to go down this journey of helping people. And he was like, taken aback, didn't know what to say. And he said, if you're serious, let's grab lunch next week. And so I got on his calendar. A few months later, I was working for him and his company up in Bloomfield, and we were serving clients together. And it was a dream come true. And that was the beginning of the journey of working with individuals and serving them.
Wow. Okay. It seems like both of you guys had like that twist and turn aspect into your journeys to get like where you guys are now. Could you introduce your company? Let me know a little bit about what you guys do, specialize
Will,
in.
you should introduce yourself too.
Oh, I should. I am Will Hullinger, yeah, and I formed Verity Wealth Partners in February of 2020, right before we knew what COVID really was.
Interesting.
And I was leaving that company I just spoke about due to some things that we just couldn't get past on the personal compensation side, and decided it was time to strike out on my own and formed the company in February 2020, and we launched not knowing what the next few months would be like, the next year would be like. And I think that was actually a real blessing, because I think if I knew the challenges that were coming down the pipe, if I understood the uncertainty that was about to hit us head on, I would have never taken that plunge. But Verity Wealth Partners is already going. I had already jumped in with both feet, and when COVID became a formal thing and our economy was shutting down, it was like, you got to make the best of a bad situation now and keep going.
Yeah.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of a similar story with us at Menace Media with the Marcus and Agron and myself. We've been working together since 2019, but I think officially launched in 2020, like right before the pandemic. Similar story with you guys, right? It's unprecedented times, but totally. I think that when you take a risk like that, you really have to go full force in what you believe in and what you want to do, right? So I think it was a blessing in disguise in terms of we really had to lock in and figure out what it is we want to do, right? So at that time, with it being unforeseen circumstances, a lot of businesses, a lot of clients, first thing they want to do is cut marketing. But in reality, right, during COVID, that was a time where having a digital presence was as more important than ever, and it's only continuing to grow. So that kind of helped us figure out that we think that marketing, social media marketing, is an aspect that can really help a lot of these mom and pop shops in Detroit stay afloat during the pandemic, right? So that kind of brings us here too, but definitely a transformative experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, maybe you guys had the same experience. COVID actually did something that was unusual in that it changed the way that we gather together or we engage with clients, right? So it used to be always in person in our industry. People came to the office or you went to their house or whatever, but you had a face-to-face meeting across the table. And now, in COVID, that would kill someone. No one wanted you in their house or near them. Right. So Zoom became ubiquitous, and like you could very easily talk to someone that would always want an in-person meeting on Zoom, and that was the norm. And it just gave you all sorts of access that maybe we wouldn't have had if COVID hadn't occurred in that moment of time. And it sounds like it provided opportunities for you guys, too, to step in and say, no, marketing is where you should be putting money because that's how you're going to keep the business going right now through this hard time.
Absolutely.
100%. Marketing is such a pivotal thing in terms of businesses because it's how the consumer hears about it and then also what they're going to think about it. It gives you that precedence of this is what I can expect and also this is why I should buy in.
Yeah, we see this in our industry all the time where there's great advisors, but they're not able to reach the right people because they don't have great marketing. And we're experiencing some of this.
I think we are that.
Yeah, we are that. We're like, oh man, we understand this industry very well. But being able to communicate that to people and building trust, it's a massive thing. And doing that at scale, too, I think the industry is still trying to figure it out. I don't think there's a lot of financial advisors that are able to do that at scale. Most of it's just word of mouth and on the golf course or at church or whatever, but using social media and leveraging that. I think that's going to be the next iteration of our industry.
Yeah, and we're a highly regulated industry, so that's really just changed recently, where we can use social media within compliance guidelines. But before, it was a big no-no, and so you would see firms like really tiptoeing around being socially engaged with people when we really should be marketing ourselves so that we can reach the folks who need our help the most.
So why was that? Why were they so hesitant?
I think for a million reasons. In our industry, we're supposed to keep diligent records of every touch point we have with a prospect or client so that an auditor can come in and see what our conversation has been like. Have we been misleading? Have we been honest and truthful? And in social media world, it's hard to really capture all of that. Right. And so I think there was a challenge compliance-wise with how do you archive all of this information? How do people go through it? What can you and what can't you say that's not misleading but is not misrepresenting who you are? And they just opened up things like reviews and client testimonials as well. So the game is changing, and we want to be responsive to that, but we always have to be within the compliance guidelines with the SEC or the state regulators.
I see what you mean.
Well, yeah, that's super interesting. I wasn't aware of that either, but it makes sense that using social media and content as a form of something that gives you leverage to continue to scale your platform, your business, get more eyes and ears and awareness on the knowledge that you guys are providing. I think that's a very awesome way for you guys to really be at the forefront of the industry, and that's what you guys are doing, right?
That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're attempting to do. That's
more
more
work
of it.
in progress.
Yeah, I think the more that I'm in this business, I've been doing this kind of stuff for 20 some years, the more I recognize that I'm really good at what I do, which is a super narrowly focused set of skills. But accounting and compliance and marketing and other things, I don't know how to do those things. I might think I know how to do them, or I might think I know how to reach our audience, but I really don't know how to do those, and we need to have experts who guide us with that. And then they have to be willing to play along with our compliance world. That's the trick, is because they don't know that side of it most of the time. I get 100 emails in my inbox every day from people who want to help us scale and reach more clients and blah, 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 the normal pitch. But if I ever want to engage with someone or get them to just leave me alone, I say, have you ever worked with an advisor who's regulated by the SEC? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, then you don't know how to work with us, and it's going to be a really difficult task for you to engage with us.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, like we're both licensed. Like we've had to take multiple exams in order to get into the positions that we're at. And I was speaking to somebody about this recently where they're like, hey, have you ever thought of just doing XYZ thing? And I was like, it's actually harder for us. It's harder because we are regulated. We have taken the exams. We are licensed. And so everything that we do is under a microscope, and we have to make sure it's in compliance. Versus if you don't take those exams or tests, you can basically say whatever you want, and there's not really anybody going to be checking you.
I see what you mean. Actually, I've been seeing your content very recently. You've been dropping some new content on financial advice, steps that people could take. What are you really trying to spread? How do you want to help people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And hey, I'll be the first one to say I don't think everybody needs an advisor immediately. We believe that there is a progression, there's a learning curve that happens in people's financial lives. And that is what our hope is, or that's what my hope is with the TikToks, is hopefully we can get people inspired and just get them little nuggets in order to help them get up to speed where, hey, we don't need an advisor just yet. We're maybe just still working on a lot of the basics, but we still need the advice. We still need information to be able to help us get to the right spots. I grew up in a family where financial stewardship and advice and knowledge was very little. My parents were really great at working hard. That was they were immigrants to this country, and they taught us work hard. But they didn't teach us a lot about finance, a lot about how to steward your money really well. And so what I've found is when you take these two pieces together, when you take the American dream of working really hard plus the financial knowledge and bring them together, that's when we can really start creating some like generational changing wealth. So I thought the thought process with the TikTok is hopefully we can get that first step.
I see what you mean. It's kind of like you're giving people the bits and pieces they need to get to the point where financial advice is like critical for them. Like it actually will work out better.
Totally. Because for me, like we don't want to just charge a fee for the sake of charging a fee. Like sure, this is a business and we're trying to make profits, but we want to add value to people's lives.
100%.
And I can give a lot of value through this social media. It can be scalable too, and I don't have to charge you a thing. And then when the time is right, when the complexity is there, we can step in and really start moving the needle.
That makes perfect sense because the field that you guys are in, it relies so heavily on trust, like literally to the highest.
Totally.
You're managing finances, and that's what people are dedicating their time, their lives to.
Rightfully.
Are there any challenges that you guys face in terms of gaining that trust, or really just because obviously you guys know what you're talking about, you're very dedicated to your field, but introducing to another person is probably like they're introduced to a whole different world. You probably run across a lot of people that haven't even spoken to a financial advisor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or the opposite. Maybe they have had a financial advisor and it hasn't been a great relationship. And so there's some mistrust. They had someone that they thought they could trust, but they couldn't. And they found that out. And now the whole industry is bad, right? We're all marred because of that.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. Our firm is unique in that there's a lot of brand name companies in our industry that people would know, right? You see the commercials on TV, you hear about them on the radio, you see their website, they're on advertising everywhere. They're regulated. Those are broker dealers in FINRA. It's a different world than where we exist, which is under the SEC umbrella as a fiduciary advisor, which is a fancy legal term, but really just means we are legally required to always, to the best of our ability, act on behalf of our clients, their interest before our own interest, which means we don't take commissions. We try not to give erroneous advice, right, to the best of our ability. We're trying to put the client in a position to be successful, and then our compensation is as aligned as it can be so that as the wealth of our clients grow, our income grows as well.
I see.
And so, but you're right, that trust building, the trust stacking that Shiv is doing on social media is a long runway. And we always talk about the arc of like the sales cycle for us is really long because it's not just a transactional interaction. It's someone getting to know you. It's someone believing you are who you say you are and then trusting you with millions of dollars that they are going to rely on for the rest of their future when they retire.
Yeah.
So there's a huge, massive exchange of trust. So it's more like dating someone, right? Like you found the one, but you got to make sure, right? You're spending a lot of time not showing off for them, but like being with them and being authentic and letting them understand. And so some of the social media stuff and the marketing things can help lay the pathway for developing that trust over time. But you've got to spend time. You've got to be consistent with the folks. And you've also got to let the pathway go at their pace. We can't dictate the pace. That's the really hard part. As much as I want to make a sale, as much as I want to get a new client, I can't force someone to be ready to trust us with all of their wealth and just hand it over and blindly say, okay, go ahead and do your thing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's no way like you're saying, like a person can just hop in straight in and just, oh yeah, I trust this guy with
very few people.
Exactly. It's like steps that you have to take. And especially in entrepreneurship, like you guys are entrepreneurs at its core. And like when it comes from like people like our field, like I'm a creative entrepreneur. Like it's entrepreneurship, but I come from a creative field. We have it's a blessing that we are so like experienced and also have knowledge on the business side of how we are. But there's a lot of creatives and entrepreneurs in this field that are not.
Totally.
Like they're hopping into this field. They know nothing about managing finances. They know nothing about the importance of setting yourself up for the future.
Especially in Detroit, with it being such a creative city and the creative economy being such a huge component to the economy itself. A lot of creatives that we encounter, financial literacy, just the basics is something that's not always super available. So that's something that we see that'll be something that's very valuable for them. And obviously you guys, your type of clients are at a different level of, let's say, established business or entrepreneurs in general, but do you guys have any advice in terms of what would you say is the most important thing that a creative entrepreneur, whether you're a musician or an artist or just a videographer, right? You guys have an advice that to help them manage their finances, or what would be the first step?
Sheet, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think when you first start out in a creative field, there's a lot of growing pains that you're going through, right? You are creating an art, you're figuring out how to market that art, and then you're trying to get a sale. And I think a lot of times you can get really captured in working on the business, investing in the business, and continuously doing that. I think there's a point in everybody's cycle where you have to take a step back and say, instead of just running and gunning and doing the Wild West and every dollar I make, I'm pouring it right back in, we take a step back and start splitting this up and creating categories and creating like business budgets in order to really make it work well. I've been there. So before I became a financial advisor, I was in the mortgage world. We bought a real estate property, and for the first part, I just blended all of our finances together And there came to be a point where it's, is this for the business? Is this for our personal life? What's going on here? There became complexity on the tax side. And as we grew, it just got worse and worse until we finally took a step back and said, okay, we can't do amateur hour where we're just every money that's coming in, we're spending. We have to create buckets for this: emergency funds, marketing budgets, tax budgets. Once we start taking that, then we can really look at the business and say, okay, this is my true take home. After I take into consideration that I have to market, I have to pay taxes, I have to maybe pay employees, this is my true take home that I can live off of. So I think starting there and really structuring your creative endeavors and looking at it in the lens of, okay, this is not just one sale, one creative thing. This is a business, and we need to start creating it that way.
Okay, no, that's really good advice. Looking at it as a business is honestly like the key component to
it. Is. Yep.
Yeah, I think a lot of creative entrepreneurs, like anyone, right? When you start a business, you are wearing every hat.
Yeah.
And it's easy to stay in that position doing that for too long. And I think people would be well served to say, okay, what I'm really great at is creating, whatever that is, whether it's fine art or it's digital content like you guys do, things like that, and figure out a way to outsource the things that you aren't good at or you don't love doing as soon as you can, right? Hire a cheap accountant so you don't have to figure out how to do the accounting, or spend your time and energy that will then reduce your ability to go and be creative, right? That's overall going to bring down your ability to grow the business if you're focused on too many things.
100%.
So it can be as easy as like a master class or something like that, just learning the basics of business and accounting so that you can do it a little bit better. And then when you can afford to, handing it off to someone who can do it as good as you or close to for a price that you can afford.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, to be honest. Like, focus, like that's like a huge factor. Like, how important is focus, like even on your journey in terms of building towards success? How like staying focused?
Yeah, it's hard too, right? Even though I have the benefit of having a business background, which is like a curse too, because I think I can do everything, right? And I come from a family of DIYers, so it's, if you can do it, you should just do it yourself. And you have to step back and, like she was saying, have a different mentality about, no, we're running a business, and that requires a different approach to how you would maybe normally do things, like what your gut instinct would be or how you've done it in the past. You need to be very like methodical and systematic about how you're setting it up, and create measurements for that so that in the future you can see, is what I'm doing actually having the impact that I'm intending it to have? There's that old saying that is, what gets managed gets measured, or what gets measured gets managed. So it goes both ways. And if you don't have something to measure your outcome against, then you can't change it in the future. You have to have some kind of a metric to measure against for the future growth, whether that's your profitability, like Shiv was mentioning, whether it's the number of sales that you're getting, the number of potential clients that you're working with, and then go quarter by quarter and see, how can I improve in one area, like one step at a time, and grow the business over time. But if you're not measuring anything, it's really hard to know if you're doing better when you look backwards over the last year, or calendar year, or a few quarters.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think people they really want specialization. Like, when you're talking about focus, my brain just went straight towards, people want not a jack of all trades, but somebody that's laser focused, because that's an easy yes. Like, I think to myself, if you've ever been on Fiverr and trying to outsource something there, you'll notice that there are people that they're jack of all trades, but then you line them up next to somebody that's precisely what you want. And it's such an obvious, I'm going to go with the person that this is exactly what I'm looking for. And so I see a lot of people, and we're culprits of this, or at least I'm a culprit of this, where you get that shiny syndrome where, oh, that's a new thing, that's exciting, let me go dabble in this. It takes a lot of self-control and focus to say, no, I am expert in this, and that's it. And if you want to work with me, just understand that this is really my realm of expertise. And so that's the conversation that we've been having is, okay, financial planning, it's a pretty big landscape. And a lot of people think that you can just go to any advisor, and you can, but we don't want to be just any advisor. We want to be very specialized in the fields that we're in.
100%. And it actually goes to, I can't remember which one of you guys made the point about wearing a lot of hats. And entrepreneurship is like, people are looking to work with something specific because they want to keep their mind on the business.
Correct.
And the other things that are taking their focus away, oh, I got to do social media, oh, I have to look at my finances, like, how you said you're better off in the beginning finding a cheap accountant and formatting it that way. That way you can, okay, this is taken care of. I'm able to grow this without worry because this person specializes in this. And you, a jack of all trades, it sounds nice.
Right.
It's good. Like, we all have tons of skills. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure. Yes.
We possess a lot of skills, but knowing how you can take one specific skill set, hone in, and then create something out of that is very key. So I definitely agree with you guys. Like, that is a good point to make.
It's a skill. Like, I think being an entrepreneur, you have unintentionally, you're that person that's, I can figure out anything. Like, I think most entrepreneurs have that spirit of,
100%.
if there's an issue, I'll figure it out. And that's what makes us so great in that field. And then there's also learning when to say no, when to say,
That's
hey,
huge.
yeah, I could learn this. I could take the time and learn this. And yet, is it worth my time to do that right now?
Man, that is
hard.
the hardest
Right.
thing to figure out, when to say no, especially in the beginning. Like, you guys can only imagine, like,
Yeah.
when we get new clients too, it's like you don't want to turn it down.
You don't want to turn them down.
especially with money.
Right.
Yeah, we're trying to stay afloat right at the beginning.
Yes.
So you say, my mentor used to say, if they could fog a mirror, you say yes to them.
Yeah.
Right?
Do they-
If
do
they're
they have a
alive
pulse?
and they're breathing, you want them as a client.
Right.
And that works to a certain extent, but then you run out of, there's a continuum, right? There's time, and we all have a limited amount of time. But the thing that I didn't realize until maybe a decade ago was that there's a limited amount of energy. The more
Right.
kids I have, the older I get, the less energy I have in general, and the quicker it goes. And if you're a creative especially, there's a certain amount of time and space and awareness that you have to create, allow yourself to have in order to make any good art.
Yeah.
I'm not artistic by nature, but I appreciate good art. And I know that the people who do that, the folks that I know, friends who are artists, that takes an amount of discipline to schedule blocks of time so that you can really actually engage in your art, your craft, what you're doing. Because you can't do it in half an hour chunks here and there. Like, we might have a meeting per hour for days on end with what we do. But in art, you can't do that. You've got to really block off time. You've got to devote yourself to it. And if you don't create that kind of space, you don't have anything to sell. There's nothing as a result of that. And so that time, that limited amount of time we have, and also the limited amount of energy, we've got to keep an eye on that as entrepreneurs. Otherwise, it gets stolen away by the urgent and the most recent bill that came in, you got to pay that, the client issue you're trying to solve, and there's always a new fire to put out. And you can get trapped just serving the people or doing the things that you have to do to put out the next fire and kind of run to the next drill, and then you lose the opportunity to create and grow and really be a maker in that space.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you.
Yeah, a lot of gems for sure. And I think it's interesting that we're talking about entrepreneurship and like creative entrepreneurship. But what's interesting is that even being an entrepreneur and financial advisory has its creative components to it, right?
Yeah.
So Shiv, as you're making content to put out on TikTok and whatnot, right? But from the gems that you guys have dropped, I think two that really stick out for me and I think can be beneficial for creative entrepreneurs is the idea that you guys are talking about of building a team and delegating the tasks that aren't directly correlated with your creativity, right? You shouldn't have to focus more on your finances, your expenses. You should be focusing on the art, right? That's where the team delegation comes into play, and then just being able to separate the two. So I think that's the first. There's multiple gems. I think the second point as well would be when you were talking about you measure or you manage what's measured, right?
Yeah.
So like a very tangible example for a musician could be that if you're putting together $1,000 marketing budget for your song and you hire, let's say, 5 influencers with that, right? A tangible way to use that advice would be to, from these 5 influencers, how many records did you sell? How many streams did you get? And then when you go back to continue to push the song or create a new marketing plan, using that as a yardstick to measure success, right? Lots of gems.
Yeah, I don't know what the metrics are for things like that, but you have to pick something, and you'll know if it's the right one or not. Because if you retest it and it's wildly different, then either maybe you something, if nothing radically changed, then you're maybe measuring the wrong metric. You got to find something that's more tangible to track or that's more indicative of the outcome you're looking to adjust, whether that's selling more records or doing something differently. And that's a trial and error kind of a process. You're not going to know right away, and it might take a couple of iterations. And I think that being entrepreneurial, we have to be willing to fail. Some people want to fail fast, some people want to fail forward, but being okay with failure and knowing that is how we grow, right? Adversity is what develops character, and that's what you have to make it as an entrepreneur in this world.
100%. That is facts.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you guys. So what type of clients do you guys now manage? Who are you specializing in?
Yeah, so we have narrowed down, and our main clientele that we're actively marketing towards and really trying to build the business around is people that receive equity compensation. And so equity compensation can be like an industry jargony term. These are people that they're receiving stocks from their company, whether it's a startup, whether it's Amazon or Google or Tesla. A lot of times, and what we're seeing more and more is that equity compensation is something that is being demanded in the workplace. People want to have ownership in the company that they're working for. And we've seen some tremendous wealth accumulation and really generational changing wealth through that. And with that also comes a lot of complexity. If not managed well, it can lead to just suboptimal performance or really creating annoying tax situations. So our dream and our hope is to really approach that people. And we've seen just the cycle of business that they're in and coming alongside and partnering with them through whatever journey it is, whether it's, hey, I want to work at this company for a handful of years and get this huge payout and retire after that. More often it's, hey, I want to work really hard. I'm going to get a huge payout, and then let's take a little bit of a rest, maybe a sabbatical. Okay, how do we make sure you're comfortable during that time and everything's going well? And then they're going to enter right back in. And they're usually serial entrepreneurs, and they're going to go back to another startup and do the same thing over again. So being the advisor to help with those huge ups and downs, that's where our clients have really seen a ton of value in saying, wow, like Shiv and Will are coming in and really providing knowledge and information that maybe they didn't know about.
I see what you mean. Have you ever had a client that you just couldn't help? Like, it was just like,
Never.
These guys.
No, we can help anybody. Oh, I'm sorry. But that we couldn't help because we didn't understand the technical part, or that
He just wasn't like he wasn't getting it. Like, it was just too difficult.
Yeah, okay, so I got a couple stories. There's always people who claim that, there are oftentimes people who claim that they want your advice, but the implementation of advice is difficult. And sometimes you get busy, or sometimes what you're looking for more than advice is validation. And if what we're talking about is contradictory to what they want to do or what they think they should do, then there is eventually a disconnect in the relationship. Because everything that we do for a client is in some ways very standardized. There are some industry standard kinds of things that are best practices, right? And lots of advisors would use them, and you could go to anyone and get similar things. But then with every client, there's always things that are unique and individualized, because what they want in life is different and unique. And the way that they engage with people is unique. And so we've certainly had a few clients where the advice that we were giving was being listened to, but it wasn't being acted upon. And at some point, the relationship doesn't go anywhere because we keep telling them one thing or multiple things that they should be doing. I don't want to should on anyone. If they want to move the ball forward, there are certain things that they have to do, and they don't want to put the work in, or they don't like the advice that they're getting, or the outcome isn't what they expected. And so there's a disappointment in there. And yeah, we've had a few clients. I've had clients over the years where it seemed like it was going to go really well at the beginning. And as you got into the relationship, and it might take a year or more, you come to the realization that, hey, this isn't a great fit for you. It's not a great fit for us. And I think we've got to move on and move forward, both of us.
I see what you mean.
So I have a question regarding the clients you work with in the niche regarding equity compensation, right? Do you guys find more of your clients being from out of state, I'm assuming, maybe West Coast, or do you guys work with a lot of people from Michigan, or how does that look?
It is geographically dispersed, right? General Motors right here in Detroit pays executives with stock compensation. There's a part of many upper-level executives' pay scales, but we do work with a lot of people on the West Coast. Certainly the startup world and like newer publicly formed companies, they're much more generous, and they also provide equity compensation to lower-runged employees. You don't have to be in the C-suite anymore to get stock compensation. And that's new in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, where we're seeing technology companies were the first ones to break through in that space and say, if you're providing value to the company, you should be rewarded, and we want your interests aligned, right? You're owning stock in the company. should encourage you to improve the company as much as possible, because then you don't just make a paycheck, you also have that generational building wealth in compound growth in the stock like Shiv was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. I think and COVID, kind of a good thing that came out of COVID too, is a lot of people didn't want to be living where the headquarters are at. So we had a lot of people that, hey, yeah, they lived in Silicon Valley, they lived in California or New York, and now they're saying, you know what, I don't want to live here. I'm going to work remote. And yeah, we've noticed that it's not just California, it's not just New York anymore. It's getting more widespread, and I assume it's going to continue going that direction too.
Yeah. There are Googlers everywhere, right? Tesla sells cars all over the place. So there's employees, and really almost regardless of what they're doing functionally in their job skill, they have some form of equity compensation. And the interesting part about getting paid in company stock is that just because you receive it doesn't mean you know what you should do with it, what the implications and taxes might be, or even in your income. And we talked to some people who they are very surprised by the level of income that it creates, but they're equally surprised in April with the level of taxes that it creates. And that's an unwelcome surprise for most people that I think we can step into that space and help people so that there's planning around that, and we don't have a large tax bill that comes out of the blue, and it can create this cycle where you're living off the equity compensation to pay taxes on equity compensation. That's a bad cycle to get stuck in.
I see what you mean. Okay, so it seems like there's like this form of like ramp up period in terms of getting adjusted to like working with the financial advisor. Like, I've never personally worked with a financial advisor. I'll be interested, but so in step one, right, what would be like the first things that you guys would look at on my end, like to get adjusted? Because I'm not really sure how that would even work.
Yeah, we always start with a firm fit meeting. And so what Will was alluding to before, where it's rare that we can't help them, quote unquote, but usually it's a bad fit between advisor and client. And so our first meeting, we go very little into the numbers, and we start asking a lot of questions about them. Who are they? What are their dreams? What are their goals and ambitions? And where do we want to take this next journey of life? Understanding that for us is immensely important, because if that aligns well with how we're advising, then we know there's most likely going to be a good amount of success there. When the advisor and client are really aligned, then the client wants to take the advice and the advisor is excited to advise. On the flip side, when there's that disconnect, that's when we see tensions, and usually clients making a decision that's not advisable, counter the strategy, and then the expectations are bad, and it just continues to go downhill from there. I think the first step, or at least what we tell clients, is like the first step is just getting to know us and us getting to know you. And let's not make a decision. Let's just figure out if we're a good match for each other, like that dating that we were talking about. And then we can take the conversation from there.
I see what you mean. So if they are a good match, like then you guys begin to look more into like their spending, or like how does that work?
Yeah.
If the firm fit goes well and we're a thumbs up and they're a thumbs up and we're going to move forward in the relationship, then we'll let them connect to our software, and that allows them to log into all of their native financial banking and investing apps that they have without sharing any information with us about usernames and passwords. So we have read-only visibility on their financial life. And nowadays, you have a login for darn near everything, from your mortgage to your insurance. So we can see everything as they just log into their accounts on our software. And then we want to go through the data with them to make sure that we understand what we're looking at, right? And understand the purpose for what they have done already, because it's a judgment-free zone. I don't know why someone set up 10 different bank accounts until I ask them, right? It might be a very good and valid reason. I love and value simplicity, but not everyone likes that. People need to have segregation in their cash so that they don't spend it all on the wrong things. I just want to hear that from them and walk through the numbers with them. And then, like she said, then we want to hear, if they're a fit, they probably have some goals and dreams that they've been thinking about for a while. And now the rubber is meeting the road, and they need some help. They've identified that they can't get themselves there, or they don't think that they can without some expert advice to make sure that the pathway is right that they're going down.
I see.
They want to make sure that they're not strained, because the dollars really matter now. And so in looking at through all of their financial positions together, we can start to understand the storyline that's there. And it really is a story, right? We're all kind of writing our own financial story with the way that we spend money. And a mentor of mine used to say, if you want to know what someone really values, You look in their checkbook. Nowadays, we don't have checkbooks anymore, but you could look in their Venmo account or their whatever, their cash statements and online. So that is really insightful to understand what people are spending money on and where the budgeting is going to. And sometimes that is incongruous. It's not a fit with what they're telling you they want to accomplish. And then we got to have some real conversations about what's going on here.
Yeah, there's often times, and I think Will and I have experienced this for our own lives too, where there's a disconnect between what we're saying we want and what's reality.
Yeah.
And it usually takes an outside perspective to say, hey, you're saying you want to, I don't know, save a lot more money or eat out less, but your spending habits are saying the opposite of that. How do we help you bridge that gap now? And that's where a lot of our brains start coming in, is we're starting to see the maybe like inefficiencies, and then we're trying to help them come to the solution.
That's actually very interesting. I think that, like, when it comes to people too, not everyone is very intentional, especially with their spending. It's a lot of subconscious spending.
Totally.
Yeah.
Having a person there that's overviewing and also pointing these things out, I think it's a difference maker, because once people are at the realization, whatever you do after you realize, and if you have a person telling you, hey, I know you want to do this, but your spending is not showing that you're trying to do this. I never heard that saying too, and that's a gem right there. Yo, you need to make these changes. Right. And that's when it actually can occur, like when it's present.
Quick story, I think an example is always helpful, right? So we had a client, and this happens from time to time, especially in a new relationship. Client says, we want to retire in X number of years. It was pretty short. They want to retire early, and they want to have a certain amount of money in retirement. And so you have to hit a certain level of assets in order to create the income stream off of investments. And we figured out what that would be. And then in our next meeting, you know, when we sat down on the Zoom together, it just was quiet initially, and I had to draw them out. So, hey, what's going on? And they're like, we've kind of been dreading this meeting because we bought a houseboat during the last quarter, and we think it might have been a bad financial decision. And I was like, yeah, I don't remember getting the call about that ahead of time. No, it was a sporadic decision. We made it on the fly, and now we're going to try and Airbnb it, but we've got to fix it up, so that's going to cost money. And the longer they talked, the worse the idea was, clearly, even to them. And they knew they had dug themselves in a hole. And they said, every time we come to a meeting with you, it's like going to confession when we were kids. And we feel bad for what we did, but we feel cleansed when we walk away. We ended up turning the meeting around, and conversationally, we knew we were going in the right direction in the future. But sometimes you have really interesting observations about people's lives that happen in the background, because it's not like we're looking at everything every day. We're having maybe a quarterly or semi-annual meeting with the client after we've engaged them and walked through the initial roadmap of how they're going to get to what they want to do next. And then in those periodic meetings, there's some surprises for us as advisors, and you got to have a bit of a poker face and then treat them kindly and with understanding that they're human and they're doing the best they can too. Yeah. But they're making decisions in real time as well. Got to come alongside them and help straighten out the path again.
Man, that is insane. I've never actually thought about that whole confession comparison. I can definitely see that being like, yo, you got to tell them like everything you did up until this point. I made some bad financial decisions.
And we're like, it's okay. It's okay. It is going to be okay. We can change it. Yeah.
Yep. We've made mistakes. I'll raise my hand as I've made so many, and it's what gets me inspired about this industry is having that knowledge. It just helps you in the next season, or even getting out of that funk. There's a lot of pressure that people put on themselves to be good with money. Yeah. And when we're not good with money, suddenly we get all the shame, and then we don't want to talk about it. Then we don't have any open ideas to change the thought process. And so we want to be the opposite. We want our clients to feel very open with us, so that way we can hopefully put truth where truth needs to be. And if they're believing a lie about themselves, we've had it where people are like, wow, we're not saving enough. And we're like, you're doing great. Take a breath. I understand that there's a lot of pressure behind this, and we're here to help you. And so that's a good portion of our job, and a good portion of the initial process is like uncovering that and creating the dream and the game plan together. Will and I typically go away and we'll add things to it and add the more technical details to making it really polished. But for the most part, clients are in that process with us. They're creating the plan with us, and we're just adding the additional technical knowledge to really ramp it up and optimize it.
No, that's very cool, man. To be honest, we're definitely going to need another session, because I want to go more in depth. Like, you guys have so much value to offer just off of just like the aspect from understanding like the nature of people to having this financial knowledge that is a key factor to turning people's lives. Like, a step forward in the right direction.
Yeah.
So we do this thing on this show every session. We like to have our guests drop a gem from like a perspective of a person that is listening in about who is getting started on their journey. You guys, with your journeys to where you're at now, from financial advisors, from starting out to entrepreneurship, like, what would you say if you had to give any piece of advice to one of the listeners?
I was actually thinking about this.
Oh, you knew this was coming? Were you prepared for this?
I didn't know it was coming, but I'm like, what is he going to ask me? Okay, he has to ask me this question. This must be in his repertoire somewhere. Two things. This is the two things I wish I would have done before joining Verity. One is talk to a lot of people in the industry. If you've talked to 5 or 10 people, double that or triple that. Talk to so many people that this is like the key, and this is what I found, is once you start hearing similar things over and over again from the people you're talking to, you're starting to get on the right track. You're getting the DNA of maybe the successes and failures. Where if you start hearing people saying, oh, you need to do this to be successful, and you've heard from 3 or 4 different people, and they're at a good spot in their career, it's going to start clicking where this is now important. Versus when I think I first started out, there was a lot of just trying stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you can fast track a lot of trying stuff by just hearing from other people what they've tried. And now you're starting to hear similar stories. Now you're starting to really grow your network in that too. The second thing is create a marketing plan, and one that's scalable. When I first started, my marketing plan was to interview everybody I could, which it went really well. There was a lot of great conversations I had, and a lot of people became clients and also just referred to other people like, hey, Shiv's in the industry now. But it wasn't scalable. It took a lot of time to book those meetings, to get in front of those people. There's cancellations. And what I quickly realized is if I spend all my time doing this, then I'm not going to have the capacity to actually advise. And so creating a scalable marketing plan is something I wish I would have done much earlier in the process.
That's great advice. Both points are like very great. Okay. I like that. Yeah, no, that's good. There's some good social media clips coming from me. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think there's a lot of different avenues you could go down. But the one thing that has become more true, and I'm probably older than all of us here in the room, I think I'm the eldest, is that you can spend a lot of time doing anything as a career. But you should find the thing that brings you joy and passion. It really makes a big difference. And I think that, thankfully, I think we're a generation apart. Your generation has caught that much quicker than I'm like an older Gen X person. We were following in the footsteps of boomers and just doing the grind because we had to be financially successful. And we've missed out, and I did, at least speaking for myself, I missed out on that fulfillment part of it. And so one thing that I've taken from somebody else, I can't remember where I heard it originally, but if someone is asking you or inviting you into doing something and the answer isn't hell yes, then it's hell no. It's got to be hell yes in order for me to put the time and the energy that I would require and want to be a part of it and do it in a manner that I'd be proud of, right? And if I don't have that kind of capacity, then I'm sorry, but the answer is just no, right? And it's not because it's maybe not a good idea or wouldn't do something interesting or be fun, but it's not going to move the needle. And I can't say yes to everything, and you've got to pick and choose. And if you start living like that just for a little while, I did this for a few years ago, just as an experiment. I said no to a lot of things and I realized midway through that year, man, I've been saying yes to all this stuff, and I'm just burning myself out doing what other people want me to do. I have no idea what I want to do. Yeah. How do I want to be spending my time? It's always being spoken for because I was saying yes to everything.
That's interesting. Yo, I think you guys have we already know you have a very bright future. In terms of content, these are some really
there's that
hitters.
TikTok clip right there.
Yeah, both. That's insane. Me and AJ, Menace Media, we guys appreciate you guys coming out. It's a pleasure always being around in the same environment, working with you guys.
Yeah.
Having Aiden around on the team. That's such a cool thing.
That's been great. It's been great.
Awesome.
So yeah, we can't thank you guys enough. You know what I'm saying? This is it's going to be a great session, and we appreciate it. So we're going to begin wrapping up here, and drop your social media handles real quick so they know where to find you.
Yeah, this is terrible. I don't even know my TikTok off the top of my head, but I believe it's Shiv like Christmas Eve. I'm really hoping it's Shiv like Christmas Eve. If it's not, then it's definitely my name. But LinkedIn is a great spot. We do a lot of outreach through LinkedIn. We're fairly active on that. So we encourage, if you're in the equity comp space or not, if you just want to know more financial knowledge and information, please follow us on LinkedIn. We post and we'll make sure to give you as much free information as we can.
Yeah, that, and I think our website, Verity WP, which is veritywealthpartners.com, veritywp.com, both will take you to that. Social media coming soon, more and more of it. We're working on a plan to hatch some ideas so we can be in front of folks more frequently and give this stuff away for people who want to do it themselves. I don't think they should, but some people want to.
Yeah.
And then for anyone else who's looking for help and advice, we'd love to have a conversation with them.
Yeah. If there's anything I can say, this is from both Will and I came from different firms before Verity. We have a very upfront and transparent mindset. So if you're even curious and you're like, I think I might need an advisor, but I'm not sure, we'd love to have a free consult with you. And we'll tell you like, hey, you're in a good spot or do these things. But if we can help, we'll also tell you that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. Appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.
All the viewers. And thank you guys for coming along. Yeah. So see you guys on the next session.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.